Thank you for having me, and I thank all the panelists this afternoon and now for all the kind words. I want to speak on a topic that actually addresses what I take to be a legitimate, if not criticism, at any rate a legitimate question that was raised by Professor Mearsheimer this afternoon, namely the place of civility in academic life. And it would be disingenuous were I to claim that that's a reasonable question. It is a reasonable question, and certainly I've been the object of criticism by my enemies, but also by my friends and comrades on my lack of civility. And I want to try to deal with it in a serious and, as time allows, a systematic fashion. Basically, this notion of academic freedom has, since its inception, included two components. The first part of academic freedom, just allow me to adjust the light here, thank you. The first aspect of academic freedom is professional autonomy. And that basically means that your peers, your colleagues, your fellow professors are the best judges of whether or not you're a competent professor, just as a doctor's guild is the best judge of who's a competent doctor, lawyer, and so forth. They may not be the perfect judges, but as against others, they're the best available judge. And that basically is designed, that element of academic freedom is designed to preempt outside interference in academic life by political forces, economic forces, religious forces, depending on the occasion. The second aspect of academic freedom is the one better known, or usually the banner under which it flies, namely the issue of liberty of speech. And there are two aspects of that. There's the internal aspect of liberty of speech, which basically means, for anybody who's read his or her Mill, and my students better have at this point, it means that in the search for truth, a basic, a fundamental prerequisite is liberty of inquiry. That's one aspect of the liberty of speech. And then there's a second aspect, which basically is that outside the university, outside the classroom, you should be free to speak your mind like any other citizen in our society. Now, that's the good side of the liberty of speech when it comes to academic freedom. But for those of us who function in the real world, we know that there's also there are real constraints in academic and freedom when it comes to liberty when it comes to academic freedom. The first constraint is, if you're in a department, you're free to say what you want to say, so long as they approve your dissertation, and so long as your contract is renewed. And for those who function in the real world of academic life, that can pose very real constraints on your liberty of speech within the university. And then there's a second, more problematic area, namely, if you carry on in a fashion which is so egregious, so uncivil in public life, it may be grounds for denying you a place in the academic world. And it's that second kind of constraint that I want to talk about this evening, namely uncivil behavior in public life and how that bears on your standing in the academic world. The example I want to look at is the example of Bertrand Russell. This University of Chicago is not an inappropriate place to raise his example. When he first came to the United States in 1938, his first appointment was at the University of Chicago, and he had a very positive experience here. At any rate, teaching. In his autobiography, he writes, "Apart from teaching, the time in Chicago was disagreeable, the town is beastly, and the weather was vile." And when he got his next appointment at UCLA, he said, "After the bleak hideousness of Chicago, which was still in the grip of winter, it was delightful to arrive in the California spring." Many of my students know I often quote that line to prove that great minds think alike. In any case, after leaving UCLA, Professor Bertrand Russell was awarded an appointment in the philosophy department at the City University of New York. And the administration was quite thrilled. They called it the educational coup of the year. Russell was, to the first half of the 20th century, more or less, you can say, what Professor Chomsky is in the second half in terms of his scientific as well as his social contributions. Well, the appointment was granted, and then elements of the Catholic Church orchestrated a public hysteria due to his heretical views on religion and morality. A suit was filed against the city of New York to block Russell's appointment, and he was accused of being, and now I'm quoting from the suit, lecherous, libidinous, lustful, venerous, erotomaniac, aphrodisiac, irreverent, narrow-minded, untruthful, and bereft of moral fiber. He had written what was, for his time, very unorthodox books on the question of sex, marriage, and religion. Despite an outpouring of support from his students and from the leading lights of academia and the liberal public, the judge ruled against Russell, and he was denied his position. And the judge ruled as follows: this appointment, meaning Russell's, affects the public health, safety, and morals of the community, and it is the duty of the court to act. Academic freedom does not mean academic license. It is the freedom to do good and not to teach evil. Academic freedom cannot authorize a teacher to teach that murder or treason are good. Well, in the face of the attacks against Russell, there were basically two lines of defense taken by his supporters. Some of them, like John Dewey, vehemently denied all of the accusations that were leveled against Russell. He claimed that Russell's writings had been distorted and misrepresented by the court, and he further claimed that Russell was a very civil person. And then there was a second line of defense, different from the first. It said Russell was hired to